Voices united, asking for change.
We're from Maine, and we're here to defeat Kavanaugh.
Demanding their voices be heard.
Susan Collins, we're your voters.
These Mainers made the 12-hour trip overnight to our nation's capital with one goal in mind: fight for what they believe in.
We believe survivors.
Even going to Senator Susan Collins' office to sit and talk with her staff about why they feel she should vote no on Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh.
She is not hearing Maine women.
I'm scared. I'm scared for myself. I'm scared for everyone else.
Doesn't matter as long as she carries someone else's shame. I carried my shame long enough, and I'm done.
Susan Collins.
Taking it to the streets and joining hundreds of others with the same message. And though the fate of Kavanaugh ultimately remains in the Senate's hands, those from Maine and others aren't willing to let it happen without a fight.
We have team coverage from Washington tonight, beginning with Samantha York, who followed a group of protesters down to the nation's capital. She's got their reaction tonight. Sam?
Yes, Cindy and Rob, only a few Mainers chose to stay behind, but those who did so because they were determined to have Senator Collins hear their voices. So they say as soon as reality set in about how she was going to vote, the harder it was to accept.
The confirmation process.
It's the moment these women have been waiting for.
I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
But not the answer they wanted.
I think every single person is feeling the way I'm feeling right now, and it's just like...
What do you feel?
Pissed. I feel like...
I'm shocked and lost, and I don't feel like we're heard.
The Mainers have been here since Thursday, hoping their voices would be heard by Senator Collins and others.
I am furious.
But they say their concerns went unheard.
She ignored us. She ignored Maine.
As sexual abuse survivors themselves, this decision is so much bigger than a simple yes.
Because, like, how are we going to... I don't know. I just don't understand how to... I don't know.
For them, it was a chance to write history, a chance they say was lost.
It was pretty intense at times, definitely not what it was earlier on in the day. A lot of protesters gathered there, including many people from all around Maine, trying to talk to the senator and trying to influence that final vote. In fact, security just moments before her vote actually forced all of the protesters and the media off of that floor to her office building, blocking them out entirely because they said there were safety concerns there. So definitely a tense scene in that area, but it's definitely calmed down here now.
Yeah.
And Sam, did the protesters that you followed give any indication of what is their course of action over the next few days?
You know, we actually just spoke to a couple of them. One of them is actually taking a train home tonight. Another is going to stay through the vote tomorrow. I think really the feeling that they were feeling after this was defeat. You know, and there really isn't a lot going on here right now, which I was a little surprised by. We can hear some protests going on in the distance here at the Supreme Court. There's some protesting going on, but it's pretty quiet. However, they do expect many more people to be coming out and showing their support or non-support for the vote tomorrow.
Washington reaching its boiling point after weeks of drama. Senator Collins caught in the crossfire. Demonstrators flooding her Washington office in uproar as they were forced out of the building over safety concerns just moments before her announcement.
Mr. President.
Collins ultimately saying she will vote to support Judge Brett Kavanaugh's nomination.
I'm shocked.
A complete disappointment for activists like Lewiston native Heather Everly.
It breaks my heart that there's so many people this is going to affect.
Everly, one of dozens of people who packed Collins' Washington office in the final hours, hoping to sway her decision.
Women live in fear.
Then bombarding her as she left her office to Capitol Hill. Everly says she even went so far as to approach Collins at her Washington home Friday morning.
Knowing what that fear is like, and I let her know that Mainers have
a level of intense scrutiny and division that has put Collins at the forefront of American politics, not letting the drama or even the fear influence her final decision.
I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, we did. We talked to her just moments after that crucial historic vote.
Yeah, and she is absolutely exhausted. She says she is so tired after the last few weeks that she's been through.
Yeah, and in fact, she says this was the hardest decision she has ever had to make in her decades of serving Maine here in Washington. In fact, protesters today targeting Collins for her decision just made yesterday, saying that she is a sellout, saying that she wasn't supporting women's rights. And ultimately, she says that she understands their concerns, but she believes that she made the right decision.
It's certainly been a very difficult situation, and the most difficult in the 22 years that I've been honored to represent the state of Maine in the United States Senate. I found Dr. Ford's testimony to be heart-wrenching, painful, and compelling.
You don't believe her?
I believe that she was sexually assaulted and that trauma has stayed with her throughout her life and upended her life. I cannot conclude, based on the evidence and the complete lack of corroboration, that Brett Kavanaugh was her assailant. And we still have in this country certain fundamental principles: due process, fairness, a presumption of innocence.
Now, we also asked Collins how she thought this might influence her political future going forward, including if she were to run for re-election in 2020. And she says she has not even thought about it, and she has actually weathered plenty of votes in the past, and she's confident she'd be just fine.
And of course, if you've been following our journey since Thursday, we arrived first here with a group of Mainers who basically came to protest and have their voices heard. They went through a whirlwind of emotion as they were here, and really the next question is, what happens now?
Inside, a vote. Outside, chaos. Protesters storming the steps of Capitol Hill and the Supreme Court Saturday, slamming Senator Susan Collins for her vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
I don't expect her to be a Democrat, but I do expect her to be decent.
Bar Harbor resident Ann Lynn Kruger says she was extremely disappointed in Collins' decision.
I have in the past found her decent and credible, and this isn't.
But not everyone is upset with the vote.
I didn't base my opinion on Judge Kavanaugh, I based my opinion on the evidence.
Sydney native Daryl Steubenrod says Collins made the right move. And though he might not agree with everything protesters are saying, he says it's a part of what makes this nation so great.
When people exercise their right to be heard, and there's dialogue on both sides of the discussion to be heard, I call that democracy in action.
While the country remains as divided as ever, Kruger and Steubenrod say they can agree on one thing: how we can move forward together.
You got to knock off the name calling.
We can totally disagree.
Have a civilized dialogue with people.
So I think Maine could be an example of what the rest of the country needs to do if we can keep the tradition of compromise and fair debate.
Now, as you can probably hear behind us, there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of protesters back here, protests happening all over the Capitol, and it doesn't sound like they're going to be ending anytime soon.
Right, and these protesters have even gone so far as to go to Susan Collins' home here in Washington in the mornings and the evenings to try and get her there as well. Meanwhile, Collins says she plans to return home to Maine tonight. We spoke to Senator Collins just moments after that historic vote. She says it's the hardest decision she's ever had to make in her 22 years representing Maine here in Washington.
Ms. Collins.
A pivotal moment in history, marred by vitriol.
It's certainly been a very difficult situation.
A feeling of relief and certainty for Maine Senator Susan Collins after casting the most controversial and historic vote of her political career.
The most difficult in the 22 years that I've been honored to represent the state of Maine in the United States Senate.
In an exclusive interview with News Center Maine, Collins says the weeks building up to Saturday's vote to confirm President Trump's pick Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court have been overwhelming.
Threats have been so serious that I have a police detail. My family, my staff.
even up to the final hours, protesters storming the steps of the Capitol and Supreme Court, saying she failed to stand up for women's rights, slamming her for being a, quote, sellout.
I found Dr. Ford's testimony to be heart-wrenching, painful, and compelling.
You don't believe her?
I believe that she was sexually assaulted and that trauma has stayed with her throughout her life and upended her life. I cannot conclude, based on the evidence and the complete lack of corroboration, that Brett Kavanaugh was her assailant.
An opinion many say could put her political future in jeopardy. Millions of dollars in PAC funds have been raised to back a candidate to challenge Collins if she runs for re-election in 2020.
I will not be intimidated by that, no matter how much money that they raise.
Unintimidated by the national spotlight, something she says is putting principle above passion.
So it's obvious there were going to be people very angry at me no matter what I did. And I have to do what I think is right, and that's what I did.
Senator Collins is back home in Maine for the weekend. She has an event scheduled in Norridge Walk for Sunday. In Washington, Zach Blanchard, News Center, Maine.
We started our journey to Washington, D.C. with a group of Mainers on Thursday who were determined to have their voices heard. They say they're devastated the vote didn't go their way, and now the big question is, what happens next?
We believe survivors.
Mainers on a mission.
We're from Maine, and we're here to defeat Kavanaugh.
Hoping to use their voices to fuel change.
No girl deserves to have someone in such high power make them feel like they have to do something.
For many of them, this trip to Washington, D.C. was about more than the signs, more than the loud chants. They say it was about standing up for what they believed was right.
I'm scared. I'm scared for myself. I'm scared for everyone else.
And even if you don't agree with them, Mainers say there's something to appreciate.
When people exercise their right to be heard, and there's dialogue on both sides of the discussion to be heard, I call that democracy in action.
Because no matter what side of the aisle you fall on,
You got to knock off the name calling.
We can totally disagree.
Have a civilized dialogue with people.
moments like this are what make America the nation that it is.
I think Maine could be an example of what the rest of the country needs to do if we can keep the tradition of compromise and fair debate.
Protesters remain in Washington, D.C., and they say they don't plan on giving up. They're going to continue fighting through the midterm elections in November. In Washington, I'm Samantha York, News Center, Maine.